Imagine with me, dear viewer, one day you walk in on your little brother while he's watching a kid's show or a cartoon movie. You just see it as a simple cartoon, nothing more, nothing less. You think it'll just keep your brother busy and stop him from breaking things around the house, but suddenly as you're sitting there watching, this scene pops up. Let me take you further, dear viewer. Imagine that this is a children's series, and what you just saw is not the first or even the second scene like this. There are actually many scenes like this in a lot of kids' shows. You might say, well, that's why we let them watch our old series and movies, the ones we used to watch. They didn't have this stuff, no grandfathers, no filth, and they didn't even try to distort the image of Islam. But today, dear viewer, I'm coming to you with 3 great personalities, 3 Islamic figures mentioned in the book 100 Greats Who Changed the Course of History. These 3 figures have had their images distorted for you and me in very famous cartoons. And surprisingly, the first character was featured in the most popular game you've definitely played, Call of Duty. The disaster is that this character appeared in every single installment of the series, from the first to the last. As for the second character, I think you all know who it is, but no one realizes that this is a great Islamic figure. This character appeared in the movie Jack Sparrow and in every part of the Pirates of the Caribbean films. The third character appeared in very famous movies, series, and cartoons. If you watch Spacetoon or MBC3, you'll definitely recognize this character. So who are these great personalities? What are their stories? How are their images being distorted? How did they convince us that these characters are drunks, womanizers, or even terrorists? We'll talk about all of this in this episode. Peace be upon you, dear viewer. In 2003, a famous film producer named Jerry Bruckheimer came up with the idea to make a movie about pirates. He actually went ahead and started producing the film. Let me tell you, dear viewers, Jerry Bruckheimer is not just any film producer. He's the same guy who produced all the Bad Boys movies, all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and a lot of other mediocre films. His movies have grossed over $5 billion. Wow, how can you call a movie like that mediocre? May God be pleased with the viewers for keeping me in check. Anyway, Jerry Bruckheimer produced the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie starring a character named Jack Sparrow, played by Johnny Depp. Because of this role, Johnny Depp was nominated for an Oscar. The movie was about the lives of pirates at sea, how they were enemies of the British Empire at the time, and all the films in the series focused on this character, Jack Sparrow. The story is about a thieving, drunken, womanizing pirate who tries as much as possible to get rid of the rightful heir to Britain, Elizabeth I. But I have a question. How is he fighting Britain and at the same time trying to get rid of Britain's rightful heir? Honestly, dear viewers, I don't know, but that's what the director wanted. In every part of the film, they tried as much as possible to portray this character as a drunk, a womanizer, and full of bad traits. But to be fair, there were some positive qualities in this character, but they have nothing to do with reality. But was this really the truth about this person? And is this the Islamic figure we're talking about? And how can she be Islamic if she's from Europe? How is it possible that this character is a great Islamic figure? So our hero today, dear viewer, from Europe, a land that at that time was known for launching crusades against Muslims. The country we're talking about today is Great Britain. Yes, Great Britain. Can you believe it, dear viewer? A foreigner. Yes, can you believe it, dear viewer? And he didn't even speak Arabic. In 1553, a boy was born in England named Jack Ward. This boy was tough as stone and had a deep love for birds. Because this child loved birds so much, they called him Jack Sparrow. Sparrow meaning bird. This name was later used in the movie Pirates of the Caribbean. So, and after he grew up, in order to earn a living, he worked as a fisherman, catching fish in the marshes. Then came the great calamity, the greatest disaster to ever befall England. In fact, this disaster almost brought down the kingdom of Britain. One day, the people of England were shocked to see a naval fleet from Spain heading toward England. This was the largest naval fleet ever It headed toward England, and this invasion was called the Armada Invasion. After this incident, Elizabeth I began to rely on pirates to hijack Spanish ships. When this news reached Jack Sparrow, he said, honestly, this is better than fishing. There's more money in it. So Jack Sparrow began his journey of capturing ships under a license from Elizabeth I. Jack Sparrow was unlike any other when it came to hijacking ships. In this journey of piracy, he was truly creative, and he became one of the most prolific pirates in capturing Spanish ships. He even became close to Elizabeth. But all of this changed when James I came to power. He ended the war with Spain and established a peace plan with Spain, and at this moment Jack Sparrow returned to his original job, which was being a hunter in the marshes. But here in England, during the reign of James I and even Elizabeth I, there was rampant corruption in the country. The workers in England were almost like slaves. They worked extremely long hours without rest. On top of all that, bribery increased, and with it, corruption, to the point that the gap between the rich and the poor became enormous. The rich got richer, and the poor got poorer. When Jack Sparrow witnessed this injustice, he couldn't bear it. So he decided to make a plan with 30 people. One day, on one of the nights, these 30 people entered the British Naval Fleet's location and stole one of the royal ships from Britain. From that moment, Jack Sparrow was listed among the most wanted in Britain, and those 30 people with Jack Sparrow became outlaws. At this point, the English government began to pursue Jack Sparrow. These pirates elected Jack Sparrow to be their leader, and this was recorded in history as the first pirate election. At this moment, retaliatory operations against England and its allies began. The year was 1603, the place was the Mediterranean Sea, and the operation was the theft of a French ship. At that time, Jack Sparrow ambushed a French ship and managed to seize it. Here was the biggest shock, dear follower. When Jack Sparrow took over this ship, he went down to the storage area and was surprised by a large quantity of weapons. This allowed them to attack European ships back and forth for 2 years without anyone being able to catch him. You see, this infidel, who was considered an infidel at that time, his role model in life was Robin Hood, who used to steal from the rich and give to the poor. As I told you, during that period there was a lot of corruption, so the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. Jack Sparrow adopted the same idea, but he was the Robin Hood of the sea. He would take the loot, sell part of it, and distribute part of it, even though, as I told you, at that time he was considered an infidel. Look how fate works in mysterious ways. But God Almighty willed to draw that fugitive from England back to him. During one of his raids and adventures against England, he managed to seize a ship that was loaded with silk. At that time, silk could only be sold in England and Europe in general, and it was impossible for him to go to that place since he was the #1 most wanted man in England and all of Europe. All of it. So there was only one place where he could sell the silk. Yes, dear viewer, it was the Islamic countries. At that time, the Islamic countries were under the Ottoman Empire, so he headed to Morocco. When he arrived there and sold the silk, he discovered something strange about the Muslims. Their morals, their character, and their way of life were completely different from Europe. This was the first time he had ever seen anything like it in his life. There were no social classes in their dealings. Everyone was equal. There was no class of nobles and a class of poor people. Instead, the poor and the rich were all the same. What amazed him even more was seeing a poor man leading the rich in prayer. He also noticed that, unlike in England, the law in this country was fair. If a poor person made a mistake, he was held accountable. And if a rich person made a mistake, he was also held accountable. These are things we now consider obvious, but he had never seen them before. He was truly impressed by the life of the Muslims. After witnessing all this, he went to Tunisia, and from that moment, he decided to convert to Islam, give up drinking, and changed his name to Yusuf Reis. Peace be upon you, my dear viewer. This was not a trivial event. It was a great victory for the Muslims and a huge disaster for the infidels. News reached the British court in London that Jack Sparrow had converted to Islam. Jack Sparrow's conversion meant that all the secrets he knew, war secrets and naval secrets that Britain possessed, would now go to the enemy state, the Ottoman Empire. He knew Elizabeth I, he knew many politicians, and he himself had served in the navy when they fought against the Spanish. On top of all that, he had already been a thorn in their side in the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and Gibraltar. Yes, dear viewer, he did all of this on his own. Now, with the legendary Ottoman navy, the Ottomans became a force that the giants of Europe feared. The situation for James I, King of England, was just like this. And indeed, my dear viewers, James II's fears came true. Jack Sparrow became part of the Ottoman ranks, and on top of that, the Ottoman Caliph Ahmed placed the legendary Ottoman Admiral under Sparrow's command. At this point, Europe put a bounty on anyone who could bring back Jack Sparrow's head. So after the news reached them that Jack Sparrow had joined the Ottoman naval fleet, they decided at this point to withdraw all these bounties. Because now, killing Jack Sparrow would mean declaring war against the Ottoman Empire. And indeed, my dear viewers, Jack Sparrow lived in safety and security until he died a natural death in Tunisia. And in our present day, many films have been inspired by the life of Jack Sparrow, but most of them are distorted from reality and greatly misrepresent the hero Yusuf Reis. And the most famous of them was the movie Pirates of the Caribbean. As for the second character, you honestly wouldn't even believe that this is actually an Islamic figure because they started distorting the image of this person since 1932. That is, from your great-great-great-grandfather's days. Don't get upset with me, my friend and loyal viewer, I'm just trying to get the idea across to you. Even Sony games like Call of Duty and many other games have featured this character, as well as many movies and series like The Walking Dead and World War Z. And you probably have no idea that there is a great character in these series and movies that has been distorted before your eyes all these years. So who is this character? Believe it or not, the character's name is Zombie. The first film in history to introduce this character was in 1932 in the movie White Zombie. What you see in front of you now is an image of the cover of that film. If you notice, in this poster there is a black man who was dead, but then this character was about a man who died and was then brought back to life. This is the character they meant by Zombie. After this film was produced, many series were inspired by the idea of this character. So, dear viewer, Zombie does not mean the living dead. Zombie is actually a great Islamic figure. So who is this zombie? What is his story? And did he really die and come back to life? This is what, God willing, we'll find out after you hit the like button, subscribe, and follow. And in the next episode, we'll reveal it. As I was saying, my dear viewer, if you've made it this far, it's not reasonable to get here and only watch one new episode. If you've reached this point, hit the like button so we can continue the episode happily. Now, in the year 1538, Portugal used to go to Africa and kidnap Muslims, taking them to the coasts of Brazil to make them slaves. For 40 years, this continued, and they managed to transport more than 14,000 Muslims and non-Muslims to the shores of Brazil. And of course, that's not counting those who died along the way, because most of the people who were transported from Africa to Brazil actually died on the journey. Except for a few. Just imagine, if the number was 14,000, how many people must have died along the way? So the question is, why did Portugal even insist on taking slaves and sending them to Brazil? What does Brazil even have to do with all of this? Because believe it or not, Brazil was a Portuguese colony at that time. And after all this injustice against Muslims by the Portuguese, this is when the thing they were afraid of happened. It was the year 1579. At this point, the slaves started escaping from their owners into the forests of Brazil. They gathered in certain areas and began forming communities specifically for Muslims. A colony called Bahia was established. This area is located in the north of Brazil, and this news reached Antonio Mencrato. If I pronounce his name correctly, he would become the king of Portugal, so he sent an army to try to wipe them out. All the Islamic communities, indeed, many Muslims were killed, but in reality, he couldn't defeat them all. These slaves were educated Muslims, steadfast in their faith and their law. This colony grew, and news about it began to spread. So, slaves started escaping from everywhere and coming to this area. In the year 1605, they declared a revolution against Portugal and named their entity the Maroons. The number of this entity grew to more than 30,000, all from Africa. And here, the 0 hour began, and they appointed a great leader over them named Ganga Zumba, who led these rebels in the war against Portugal. And this is not the zombie we're talking about in this episode. Zumbi is still alive. They became such a powerful force in the region that even the Portuguese king sought to make peace with them and offered them a deal saying, look, under the Portuguese flag, we will free all the slaves here in Brazil. And here a leader appears who rejects this agreement because he knows that these Portuguese are tricksters. He refused to be under the banner of these crusaders. Yes, dear viewer, he is the one who brought Zumbi. He handed over the banner to him, and Zumbi continued the journey of freedom against Portugal. Portugal was going crazy here. They couldn't do anything to this man. Imagine, they kept fighting him. Now it's the year 1694 and they still couldn't stop Zumbi's advance against them. The territories Zumbi controlled kept expanding. In 1695, Portugal started to adopt a new policy, turning to the tactics of the Mongols. They began to follow a scorched earth policy. And the Muslims began to fight valiantly against the Portuguese. Zumbi wasn't supervising the battle from afar. He was right there on the battlefield, overseeing it himself. Until Zumbi fell while fighting alongside the Muslims. After he died, the Portuguese crusaders took Zumbi's body and began to mutilate it. They started displaying it in the cities in this horrifying state. And the Portuguese continued exterminating the Muslims in order to put an end to this revolution, and this remains a stain of shame that haunts them to this very day. As for Zumbi, he became a celebrated hero in Brazil to this day. And for all Muslims, even today in the city of Maceió in Brazil, they have an airport there named Palmares. Out of respect and appreciation for this brave hero, Zumbi, these are not Muslims who are celebrating. They honored a great person who did something significant in their country, so we must know who the heroes of Islam are. If Zumbi fought the Crusaders on the coasts of Brazil in the far west of the world, our Islamic hero confronted the Crusaders in the greatest naval battle in Islamic history. So, what is the story of this decisive war, and who is the commander who led this battle? And why in particular did this Muslim's name become an inspiration for American movies and Hollywood? And how did he save thousands of Muslims from the Catholic Inquisition in Andalusia? This is what, God willing, we will learn about in this series if you liked it. In this segment, we discuss the recurring attacks on Muslims every so often, like Zumbi, Jack Sparrow, Salahuddin Barbarossa, and Amr ibn al-As. And at some point, they reached even more extreme levels than this. They even targeted our scholars and elders like Muslim and Bukhari, and Ibn Taymiyyah and Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab. We must learn and teach the coming generations the truth. Who are the worst of creation and who are the great ones of the earth? Rather, God's laws in history are clear, but if you abandon them, you will only lose in the face of the power of distorted media. Start teaching, even if it's just yourself. The first thing said to the Prophet, peace be upon him, was read. And peace be upon those beings, for they are free from all shame and sin. I ask Allah the Almighty to make us and you among those who listen to the word and follow the best of it. Peace be upon you.